Today's episode is one I've been wanting to do for a while because aged care is one of those topics most of us don't really understand until we absolutely have to. Now, when a parent starts declining or there's a fall or a hospital stay that doesn't quite resolve, families suddenly find themselves trying to make big decisions very quickly, often with very little context, but a whole lot of emotion.
And there's a lot of confusion too. People mix up retirement villages and rest homes, assume care is free, or think there'll always be a bed nearby when it's needed.
So today, we want to explain how the system actually works. We're joined by Tracey Martin, CEO of Aged Care Association New Zealand. Now, Tracey represents most of the residential care sector across the country, and she hears every day from providers, clinicians, families, and older New Zealanders about what's working and where things are really under strain.
Tracey's also spent time on the other side of the system, having served as Minister for Seniors, so she really understands both the policy side and the very human impact of these decisions.
Thank you for joining us, Tracey.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me.
You use terms like rest home and care beds just as part of your day job, in and out. I'm not sure we are all attributing the same meaning to those words as what you're attributing. So could you maybe start us with what is aged care, what is a care bed, and what you think the public might understand, or our listeners and viewers, and we can build from there?
Sure. So aged residential care, which is really what we're talking about here, is has since the 1990s been basically 100% privatised. So that's what happened in the 1990s. And the terms that you hear often inside the conversations about when people require residential care are standard beds, rest home level, hospital level, dementia care, and psychogeriatric care. So nobody can gain any of that care without being assessed as needing it. That's the first thing. And often that's the first time people start hearing those terms. And let's just take rest home. Let's just take that word. Most people still think, well, when they think of rest homes, they think of sort of the 1970s, 1980s, possibly their grandparents went in their 60s. They used to be, independently walk down to the lounge room and have a cup of tea and cakes. It's not like that anymore. We've done a very good job on keeping people at home for longer. So the average age of entry is 85 and the average length of stay is 18 months in rest home level and all those other levels as well. So the picture people have in their head is quite different than the reality.
So what about the difference? I always get confused between retirement village or home and rest home.
Right. So a retirement village is a lifestyle choice. It is a choice that people who are able-bodied, living independently, but they've decided that for whatever reason they want to sell their independent home over here and come into a village-like of environment. Sometimes that's because it's a gated community. It's because it has a set price that is fixed for life once you get in there, and that gives you access to swimming pools and country clubs and those sort of things. It's got nothing to do with residential care, but often the two are conflated, as you say.
So the difference with the retirement village is you're probably younger or fitter. You're more independent, you pack bowls and you do all that stuff, go on the bus trips, whereas the rest home, you're more likely needing care.
Yeah, no, you're definitely needing care. So you've been assessed as needing care.
Yeah.
Now, you could be living in a retirement village and you could have been assessed as needing some in-home help because that is your home. That unit in that village is your home. And so external providers will come in and help you if you've been assessed as needing it. But when it comes to residential care, there's a much higher acuity bar to be able to access that. And so you definitely have been assessed as requiring often 24/7 care.
Nurse-led care.
Nurse-led care.
It's okay. So I think where some of the confusion comes in is that you do get some of these retirement villages that have the retirement village in there, the independent living, and then they've got the hospital, what they would call a hospital, or an aged care facility on the same site. And so you and I kind of think, well, it's all just one and the same, but There's the very important distinctions, isn't there, around what you're getting from each. They have different legal definitions and entitlements.
Yeah, and different auditing, different oversight. So there's very little oversight. There's one single act for the retirement village, for example. It's a contractual relationship between the person who buys the aura and the person who owns the village.
Okay, so let's just define aura.
Sorry, that's an occupational rights agreement. So for a price, you buy that for as long as you wish to stay there, or till the end of your life. That's what the occupational rights agreement is. And you must get legal advice. And so it's a very much a contractual relationship. When we come to talk about care, the major funder, while the individual must in the first instance fund their own residential care through their superannuation and any money they have above what is the government set thresholds, the state is actually the largest funder of those care facilities. Because if the individuals weren't there, they would be in hospital. And hospitals cost us, the New Zealand taxpayer, around about $1,800 a day for the bed. At the moment, the hospital bed in a care facility is funded at around about $250 a day. It really should be closer to $600, but that's where the settings are at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So do people tend to plan their way into residential care, or does it kind of happen?
No, it happens. So, I mean, I've since, the last 18 months in this role, I've spent a lot of time going and talking to groups like Grey Power and Probus and, University of the Third Age. And the first question I ask is, hands up everybody who wants to go into residential care. Nobody puts your hand up, right? We all want to stay at home for as long as possible. The second question I ask them is, how many of you would like to go to hospital just for the couple of days, just for the hell of it? Nobody puts their hand up for that either. But we know we need hospitals because at some stage, some of us are going to require acute care. And actually around about 20 to 25% of us over the age of 85 are going to need residential care. But we really do just ignore it. We just decide it's not going to be me. But 1 in 4 of us is going to have dementia, for example. So yes, it is a conversation that people just find themselves at a crisis point, and suddenly there's a sort of a scramble to understand the system.
So what are the most common triggers?
A fall. A really bad fall. Dementia is becoming a really common trigger when it gets to a stage where, care partners, family members can no longer manage. The individual may start to become violent as they progress down through the illness. And also requiring 24/7 hospital level care, nurse-led hospital level care. That you can pay for that privately if you can, but many of us cannot afford to do that. So assessed as going into a residential care facility to receive that level of care.
And that assessment is done for you.
Yes.
It's not something you necessarily opt into or can control.
No.
Get the answer, not like it, put it in the bottom drawer and you're fine. It's actually that triggers a whole separate process that has to be followed.
Well, it doesn't, nobody can force you into a residential care facility, but you certainly will have an assessment. If you're in hospital particularly because you've had a fall or there are other things going on, whether that be dehydration or other infections, and you have now been assessed by the needs assessor that you really should be in residential care for the level, for the level of acuity you have, you need this level of care. You can refuse it and go home. The problem is it'll get worse and eventually something much bigger will happen and your end of life may not be as pleasant as it would have been if you'd have accepted the recommendation.
And can put a lot of pressure on family. But before we go into the care a little bit more, I just want to circle back, if I can, to the retirement villages and the rest homes. Because in New Zealand, often they are on the same property.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking this is what's adding to some of the murkiness around how this actually works. You often see on the tin of some of those larger privately owned retirement villages, they can offer a continuum of care.
Yeah.
Which I think is nice to have on the tin. It's certainly a very eloquent marketing phrase. I'm not sure if what's in the tin is actually as what's promised, right? Because correct me if I'm wrong, or there isn't a recognition that when you do have to move into the care suite, that's a different legal agreement often. So it's not, you don't go from your independent living and you can just kind of waft over to the hospital as you want. That was one thing that I thought was quite interesting. There aren't always beds available for you at that hospital. I think when I was looking at I think the financial statements for one of the big providers, and maybe there was 5 or 10% of hospital beds for the residents, and I'm thinking, well, you'd want to time that pretty well if you wanted it. And these are the things that I don't think you are even aware of when you're living independently and you're feeling invincible. Can you explain a little bit about those distinctions?
I think the first thing I need to explain is that there is this sort of myth out there that the big six, right, the large sort of listed company providers provide most of the beds in New Zealand. They do not. So 60% of the residential care beds in New Zealand are provided by charities, not-for-profits, and small owner-operators. A nurse and her husband will have bought in an Ekatahuna or somewhere like that. They've bought a little facility, maybe 30 beds, 40 beds. So first of all, that myth has put a bias on how people think about how aged residential care should be funded. So the next thing we need to think about is, you're right, and people buy into into retirement villages because they don't want to know about it in great detail, but they want to know that building's over there, right? Now, Somerset put out a really honest statement at the beginning of last year. Something like 70% of their beds had individuals of their hospital level and rest home level dementia beds had somebody in them, a New Zealander in them, that had come from the public health system, to a point where their residents could not get into a care bed if they needed it. So Somerset quite honestly said, our responsibility is to the people who have bought into our villages, believing that this is what we said, there's a continuum of care. So we're going to have to stop taking people from the public health system. And I can tell you that got quite a reaction from government because they have just relied on the residential care sector taking people out of the public health system, even though they know that they lose money every time they do it. The only other thing I would say is they don't call them hospitals. And we're trying to get that hospital level care changed. Hospitals are free, hospitals are full of doctors, and you normally get better. None of those things are true for residential care because they're full of nurses and clinical staff for sure, and they have to be attached to GPs, but you don't generally get better from getting older. So we're trying to break that.
So the GPs there are all individual, belong to individual patients rather than being a GP for that.
You can choose. The patient can keep their own general practitioner. But I mean, because there's been such a shortage of general practitioners in New Zealand, we've got members who have actually entered into business arrangements with a number of GPs. The GPs want to be doctors and look after patients. They don't really want to be business people. So some of our members have taken over the running of their businesses for them, and they've made themselves more available to their care facilities. And that's just another shift that's happened in the last 5 years.
So, Tracey, what happens if you've been relying on this, you've been with Somerset or Ryman or whatever, and you need the care, and there's no room for you? You've been there all that time.
Wouldn't that just rip your nightie?
Will it?
You'd just be like, what?
Yeah, well, it is. It's certainly challenging, right? And I mean, I know that the facilities themselves, the companies themselves, do their absolute best to try and make it work, whether that be to try and support in the home for a longer period of time. And I've known that there have been facilities who've done that until there is a bed available, or they will search around if they've got other villages and other care facilities in the general area, they will search for a bed there, and then when one becomes available, transfer back. I mean, they really do bend over backward to try and provide, but we're 12,000 beds short for the predicted number that we need. So this is going to happen, and it is happening more and more and more frequently. And the more rural or regional you are, the worse this becomes. Yeah.
So where do you go?
Well, Yeah, it's tricky. So, like, with regard to dementia at the moment, there is, and now I don't want to use the word story, actually. There's situations that have been documented where couples who've been together for 60-something years, and one of them has now, is suffering from dementia and requires 24/7 secure care, and they're being shifted out of their town. So there are no facilities. We've now got towns with no facilities at all, Wairoa, Reefton. We've got facilities on the west coast that towns don't have one, but there might be in it up to a bed 3 hours away. And so, you get situations like the gentleman whose wife of 60 years was moved 3-4 hours away from his home, who gets up every morning and drives to spend the day with her because she's still the woman he loved, even though she's now in this circumstance. And then he drives the 3 to 4 hours back in the evening, driven off the road 3 times.
Cost of petrol.
Yeah.
You pay for it.
And what will happen when this man's in his 80s and 90s, so is his wife. And, of course, now you've got to go for your driver's license every other year. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's cruel what we're doing because we haven't set the system right to deliver care inside the communities where people have loved and people have lived. Yeah.
So let's say you've been assessed by an assessor, which is a term many of us have never heard before unless you've had a parent go through this. Could you maybe take us through what triggers that assessment, and then once you've been assessed and it's determined that, look, you really need to have extra support, nurse-led support, so you need to be in a facility, how can you choose your facility? Like, what are your options? Just to take us through that.
Right. So normally you would have a NASC assessment. So that's a Needs and Services Coordinator, a NASC, would come and assess you. And for residential care, it's triggered by age. So the first thing is you've got to be over a certain age, and then it is around the acuity levels that you have. So you get assessed. And then a decision is made as to whether can this individual be supported at home, or does this individual need to be supported in residential care? And often a social worker is also involved at the hospital level, but it's the responsibility of the family to find, in the first instance, a care place. So family members have to make inquiries around the general area that they want mum or dad or whoever to be, where they want them to be. And when you're talking about psychogeriatric and secure dementia care, that can be incredibly challenging because that's a really heavy diagnosis for a family. It's changed everything about the future now. And at the same time, they're trying to ring around and find a facility that has a bed available.
Without trying to be flippant, would there have been earlier signs or signals that they were moving in that direction, right? So if they have got dementia or something, there would have been awareness that could be, they possibly didn't know how to navigate it, but that could be the end result that we would have to be dealing with. Is that fair?
So, well, I'm not a specialist in that area, but there would be signs, absolutely. Probably one of the things, Catherine Hall, the CE from Alzheimer's New Zealand, I think what Catherine would say is, we're not picking up those signs early enough, just as even our general practitioners are not picking them up early enough. Because if you pick it up early, well, this is now just my view, we used to have conversations about the big C, about cancer, and it used to be like a death sentence instantly. Now, because we've had conversations and we've done research, the next question, instead of, well, that's it, it's over, is what's the treatment? I think dementia is the big D. It's the next big conversation we have to have. And when you get a diagnosis of dementia, the next question is, so how do I manage it? And we need to be putting plans in place because there are things that one can do to plan for your life.
Well, we can confirm that because we had a geriatrician on and they were taking us through the different types of dementia. And if you can get to it early enough, she was saying some of the things can actually be reversed. But you have to get to it early enough.
That's right.
You can slow it down or you can just manage it. And it provided so much hope for a topic that it's the big D. You don't even want to talk about it.
That's right. And having to be able to, sitting down with your spouse, because I've done this recently. I sat down with my spouse and said, I don't want you to be my carer. So if I get a diagnosis of the big D, one, we're going to face it and we're going to plan it. What can I do to slow it down? Or what does the progression of the illness look like? How can we future-proof our house for me to be here for as long as possible, as long as it's not a burden to you? Because I want you to stay the person who loves me, not my carer. Now, that's a personal conversation that you have with the person you love. And I do have some expectations of him. If I have to go into a secure care facility, I expect him to visit me every day. It's, so I'll put that on him. But it's just, I'm not going to put the rest of the care.
I'm going to say to my husband, don't expect me to care for you.
Yeah.
But I will visit you.
Yeah. And there's a wonderful story for the care village, for example, that is in Rotorua. And again, another story, wife needed to go into this care facility. It's a secure dementia facility, all little independent housing. And her husband comes every morning with a little box of biscuits. They're her favourite biscuits, always have been. He spends the day with her, so he helps her at the lunch table. He helps her at the dinner table. They sit together on the sofa. She knows him. She's comfortable with him, but possibly doesn't know who he is. Yeah. But this is still the woman he loves. He just knew he couldn't care for her.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So if we go back to you've been assessed, maybe not with dementia because that's kind of an extreme, but
with physical frailty.
Yeah, your medications are whatever they're doing. It's been presented to you. Next stop is a rest home. Your family get the news. They're scurrying around trying to find a rest home.
Yeah, and well, often the first thing that families are trying to do, in my experience, is they're trying to figure out if they can help at home. And there's an awful lot of guilt and weight on families at that point, because nobody wants to think that they that it's taken that they don't love mum or dad enough that they can care for them. But people are working. People can't necessarily give up full-time roles, and what we're talking about is an acuity level that is very high, and it needs clinical care. So the first thing they try to do is try to see whether they can figure it out at home, because nobody wants to go into residential care. And then the next thing they have to do is start ringing around. And it will depend on the level of care, whether it's rest home or hospital level. And again, what is the availability? Auckland, for example, is running at around about 97% full across Auckland. There's very few beds across Auckland, which means that 97% is really 110% full,
And so by default, those people will have to be cared for at home with maybe some in-home support or whatever until they can find that placement. Is there a waiting list?
There are many of our facilities have waiting lists. Yeah, for sure.
I think going back to retirement versus rest home, I think rest homes, to me, say hospital, but that's not true. Is that right?
It's a bit uninformed, like you and I, it probably is. But I think what Tracey's saying is,
no,
there aren't doctors. No. It's like a nursing home. Yeah. Like we would call a nursing home.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the term we use is a care facility. Yeah. And it's full of clinical care. But also it's now this person's home. So it's clinical care in the least hospital-like environment that people can make it. That's actually the goal. Right? Yeah.
So you get your wee room and
we being the operative word.
Yes.
Well, and then that's where we come back if we talk about that term standard beds, right? So a standard bed is a term that Te Whatu Ora uses because that is what they fund. Now, there's nowhere that you can I cannot get under any mechanism a clear definition of what a standard room is. But my understanding is that when we had geriatric hospitals up until the 1990s, the size of the standard room was the size of the bed and enough space to go around it for the nurse to move around the bed. That's what they fund. And that's why, when we think about today, our expectation is that at the very minimum, the standard should be there's room for a bed, there's room for some chest of drawers, I'll have an ensuite, and a chair.
Wait a sec.
And that would be the size of what should be the standard. And that's one of the things we're trying to get the government to agree to is lift what is that really basic measure of the standard room, lift it up and fund it appropriately for today's expectations.
Which is tricky because there isn't enough money for the current level of care requirements. Yeah,
it's an interest. It's all swings and roundabouts, right? And I do hear that a lot, that, there's not enough money, That's why we have to have a conversation with New Zealanders about the asset and income thresholds. That's why we have to have a conversation about, well, actually, if we don't support residential care, you're going to have to build more hospitals. And hospitals are far more expensive than residential care.
Absolutely.
And most of the cost of residential care is carried by either a charity, a not-for-profit, or a private owner. So all they need is a margin there to be able to maintain and make themselves investable again, so banks will lend them money.
Yeah, that's right. The whole thing's all a bit cooked at the moment, but it needs to be reworked.
And I guess the big surprise people get is how much it's going to cost them.
Yes.
Family.
Well, and I think that's the other thing, because it's very big writing on the Ministry of Social Development website that says, and this has been the policy since 1997, aged care, the cost of aged care is your responsibility. But if you meet the criteria, you could be eligible for a government subsidy. So what happens when people have been assessed as needing residential care, they can apply to the Ministry of Social Development for the government subsidy. So they have to have under a certain threshold and income level, a certain asset and income level. And if they fall below that, then all of their superannuation must in the first instance be used to fund their residential care, and they receive back about $57 a week in spending money. And then the rest of, if there is still a top-up needed to what is the gazetted standard bed price for different levels of care, the state comes in.
Okay, so I'm just going to wind it back a little bit. So we've just had, Mum's just been, had an ASK assessment and she's off to a rest home. I've called around, had an argument with my family. We've all had a version of what's going to be the right care, and someone's decided, I can just see it. It's horrific.
Yeah.
And you've experienced it, haven't you, directly? So then there's the financial implication. So Mum, this is all hypothetical. My mum's amazing. But she's got a home that she owns. Would she need to sell that?
So
to care? So
is your mum at the moment, there's no other spouse?
No other spouse.
Right. So because your mum is, right. So because your mum is on her own and she owns her own home,
yes,
if she needs to go into residential care, she would need to cash up that asset. And if I recall correctly, she's able to keep about $157,000 in the bank, but the rest of it needs to be used to provide for her residential care down to that threshold, and then the state will step in.
Okay, so I can't do math on my head, but let's just say her house is worth $500,000.
Yeah.
So around $350,000 of that is going to be paid to the state somehow.
Yeah, over a period of time
as she consumes the care.
Yeah.
And if she needs to whip into the rest home and her home hasn't sold, is there a way of managing that transition?
Yeah. So often what happens is that the facilities actually just take the individual in and bear the cost of it while the house is being sold. So often that happens. But there is an MSD loan system. I'm not saying it works very well, but there is an MSD loan system so that there's there's some transition space there for financials if the care facility can't do that. Because I mean, it's not a very easy market to sell on at the moment, right?
Understand.
Yeah.
And so, Mum, we found a rest home, and this is going to lead to your comment on standard beds to try and contextualise it. Mum likes nice things. I would want her to have a bit of space. I definitely don't want her sharing a bathroom.
Yeah.
Things that we've come to expect are just normal, but certainly above the threshold of care that was delivered in 1997.
Or actually, let's just stop there, because the care is not the problem. People are not paying more money for better care. Anybody who delivers residential care in this country must meet the same standard. They're all audited to it. And they get either a 1 year or a 4 year, re-audit cycle. So care should be consistent across the country, regardless of what you pay. What you're paying for, and let's just go to this. We talk about premium charges. And Premium charges were allowed under the age residential care contract probably in the last decade, and it was because the state didn't want to up their funding. So we all know that clinical costs have risen, et cetera, and the state didn't want to increase that to the level that recognised what those clinical costs were. So they gave the providers an opportunity to charge more for accommodation, and that's how they can only charge a premium if the room is got something extra than a standard room. Which, like a bathroom
or bigger, or
a view out the
or a view.
Exactly. And so and how you know that the funding model is so broken is that if you think about Presbyterian support services take everybody that nobody else will take, because I think the public that forgets gang members get old too, drug addicts get old too. Ex-prisoners who might have been in prison for 30-something years and then come out, they've got dementia. So somebody has to look after those individuals, and they're not necessarily easy individuals to look after. This picture of lovely little old ladies all the time just isn't the picture that many of our people are dealing with. So the Presbyterian Support Services are one of those organisations that just take whoever. But even they've had to start charging a premium to some people of like $10 a day or $15 a day because they just cannot make ends meet.
Which is crazy, because the impact of them not being able to cover their costs, they have to defer their maintenance, some of their staff don't get the pay rises that they want to. If I can just query something on your comment, and the theory is every facility should have the same level of clinical care.
Yep.
In reality, that isn't always the case.
You might be talking staffing levels, are you?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
And the ratio of patient to carer or nurse to patient, it does vary.
Yes, because there is no set level. So there is a recommended safe staffing level, but there's actually not an entrenched safe staffing level. And it's a conversation we need to have. But one of the things we need to do is we need to have a look at Australia, and we need to say that's what they have done, which is legislative mandated care minutes. So a nurse must stand beside a person for 33 minutes every day or something. That is, one, blown out the cost. Two, it hasn't made the care any better because that person might not have needed 33 minutes, but that person might have needed an hour and a half. So we need a better model than that. And again, it's part of what we're seeking from a reform, really.
Do you find that often when it comes to the care and the decisions being made, that there's one member of the family that tends to stand out? That
well, it's one of the
care and others disappear.
Yeah, it's one of the other parts that really people need to have a conversation about, and that's having an enduring power of attorney. But it's so expensive. Like, I'm in current conversations with the Law Commission and so on, about it costs around about $600 to $800 to go through the paperwork to get an enduring power of attorney. So large numbers of New Zealanders we're finding they're in a dementia ward or a psychogeriatric ward, or 89% of all those in rest home level care have cognitive decline. So they really need an enduring power of attorney. And so one family member is the decision maker. Where it works well, they work collectively with others, but they're the person who signed the legal documents. Where it works badly, you get other siblings that are blocked from even visiting, and the care facility must follow the instruction of the EPOA.
And like the stress, remember with Gervin, that the stress of just having a dissenting view on, so it's not necessarily that you're trying to block or obstruct a sibling, but them just having a view would just be, it would be horrible.
It breaks families.
Yes.
It breaks families. It's real, because the guilt that is currently inside the system for families it's such a tragedy, and we must be able to do better. And planning, I think, would help us do better, right?
Absolutely.
Are we doing anything about it? Is that happening?
Who's the we?
It's always the great we.
That's right. Well, I mean, I think what's great is, for example, like what you guys are doing, right? So this is one way, having the conversation, because we're all so polite. We don't want to suggest that anybody's going to die. Yeah, we all know that we're going to die. So having open conversations like this about this is the reality of it, demystifying what are the options and the true points and how one can get support and those sort of things is another way to do it. But actually, government has to step up and do better. Government has washed their hands of this for decades now. So not this government, multiple governments. And they need to step up, and we need reform now because New Zealanders are being failed by the system that's in place.
And more of them are going to be running the care.
Yeah.
Gosh. Can someone be moved into residential care if they don't want to go? I mean, assuming they don't have their enduring power of attorney, they haven't given that away to the daughter or the son.
Yeah.
But if someone says, no, I'm not going, I'm just not, I'm going to stay in my house. To hell with it,
I think I'm not an expert in this area, but my understanding is no. You have the right to refuse treatment.
Right. Then it becomes a committal or something, doesn't it? Which is
and so that's another legal thing. Yeah, that's right. And and I've never personally heard of a case, but somebody that's listening to the podcast might. But you know how we've had that the courts have actually ruled against parents and taken temporary custody of a child to provide medical treatment, right? We've had those odd cases. I've never heard it with a senior. And I'm not sure that I want to, but my understanding is you have the right to refuse treatment.
Wow.
It's intense.
Well, it's
Okay, so we're talking about once it becomes an age residential care problem, what if we got into the issue earlier? I mean, earlier you said the example of dementia there is if you get to it earlier, you can slow some of this down. Do you think that there is an opportunity to push this back into healthcare rather than an aged care problem?
Yeah. So, first of all, I'm getting T-shirts printed that say aged care is healthcare, right? We provide all of the support to release emergency departments who are overwhelmed because they can't put individuals who need acute care into wards. So one of the things we're trying to talk to government about at the moment is we are full of healthcare assistants and nurses. We don't have to have individuals placed inside our facilities as this is it, that's the last thing, that's the last move you're going to make. We can do short-term recovery care and then make that senior stronger, and then they can go home, right? We're breaking care partners in this country because the only way to get respite, because there's so few respite beds, is to be pushed to almost just falling over. If we had revolving respite, a couple of things would happen. First of all, care partners would actually get a break on a regular basis and they'd be able to look after their spouse for longer. But also the individual with dementia, the family and the facility would create a relationship. So as the illness progresses, what we want for those suffering with dementia is people they know and in environments that they know so they feel safe in, and then all things get lower. Do you know what I mean? Lower medication, lower regressive incidents. So by creating revolving respite, we would be able to create that relationship that when the individual did need, if they needed to come into permanent care, they're already known, they're calm, it's not such a... And the family knows that they are safe because they know the facility. It's about relationship.
So I love the idea of respite, but we still need to build respite beds, wouldn't we?
Yes, we still need more beds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because when I was looking into the respite, I was talking to actually a friend, and she was a nurse looking after her older husband who had dementia. So she was actually qualified and she was doing it from home. I said, how are you going? And she says, I'm not. She said, I'm at my wit's end.
Yeah.
I need respite. And then I'm casually and flippantly, well, just book in for a respite session.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I tried to call and it's a 18-month wait list for 2 days.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
what area does she live in?
She was living in Tauranga at the time.
Yeah.
And not only that, she's like, and he doesn't even want to go there because the facility is so grim. So she's like, well, I'd get anxiety dropping him. He's about to go, you know, to escape.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of, I think the respite is necessary. And I think that we neglect the carer in this process and almost...
Yeah. We're breaking care partners.
It's
We're breaking care partners. And again, the guilt that they feel about not being able to manage for the person that they love, who has said to them, I don't want to go into residential care, which is why, the conversation I had earlier where I've released my husband from that. It's okay. So we can do much better if we work the system differently. Day programs, for example, dementia day programs. Imagine if, again, they are well-resourced and they are inside or attached to care facilities. Again, it's about relationships, because care partners, if you have a wedding out of town, your partner finds change and difference really challenging. You can't really take at a particular part of that journey. You can't really take your partner to a big family wedding with lots of activity, children running around and so on and so forth. So if they have a relationship, they can go and have the respite, and the care partner can actually get a life, which they're entitled to.
And is there anything being done about that, or where does the answer lie? Is it the government stepping up and saying this is what we're going to?
Well, so there's a ministerial advisory group at the moment that we had advocated for that for the last 18 months, and so it's really nice to see the government announced it at the end of last year. And the advisory group, while the terms of reference are quite narrow, they are to provide government with solutions. How do we connect and have flow? How do we make sure that we can have individuals over 65 flowing out of hospital, perhaps into residential care and then back home? How can we have people flow in and out of residential care for respite? What are the settings that we need? Some of it's about the siloing of contracting that we've got. So there are practical things that could be done that don't all cost money. But at the end of the day, you can't have this enormous number of over 85-year-olds that we're going to see explode in 2028 and the huge number of over 65-year-olds. You can't do all that without some more money as well.
And maybe some investment from the families and those older people in their own health trajectory.
Yeah.
Because if we say estimated, projected 12,000 beds short for rest homes, so that means that the hospitals are going to be full. And already, if you walk into a hospital ward, it is filled with geriatric patients.
That's right.
And some of them are just delayed in their discharging, but we call it a bed block.
Yeah, and
whatever we call it.
Yeah, I really like the way you use that language. It's delayed discharge. They're not blocking anything. They're not holding on to that hospital bed, making sure that nobody can shift them from it. There's nowhere for them to go.
So they're in the bed and the wards are full. So then we can't take on, the emergency rooms are full. We can't take on the patients to get through this. And this is to emphasise your point that aged care is healthcare.
Yeah.
And so then you say, well, if we're going to keep them out of the emergency department, well, we need to get to the GP. Oh, but the GP wait list is 3 weeks. Even if I had an emergency, I'm not going to be able to see them. And our GPs are overworked.
Yeah.
We've got to do this differently.
And they're ageing.
That's right. It's one of those other strange things that's taken 18 months of talking to politicians to get them to see. An ageing population means there's less young people.
Yeah.
So you can build another doctor's school somewhere, but you're going to have less people to pick from to fill the doctor's school. So again, how are we using technology to actually have sort of a hub and spoke meal? There's the doctor here. Do we actually need to physically see the doctor or the nurse practitioner? Or how do we use technology to spread that effect of that one really highly skilled human being?
Is there a country that's doing it right?
There's lots of countries in the same boat, and they're all doing parts really well. I mean, there are parts in New Zealand. Our care, the level of clinical care being provided generally across our country, is an exceptionally high standard. I mean, Australia had to have a Royal Commission of Inquiry into aged care because the standard of care was so bad, right? So we're not there at all.
Yeah.
The overwhelming of our system is the one thing that could take us. But I mean, Japan's they're dealing with the oldest population, so 100 plus, and they're dealing with that and with technology because again, there's just not enough young people.
And I'm pretty sure in Japan, this could be a myth, but doesn't the wife have to look after the in-laws?
Well, it was, but I have a very, very good friend in Japan, Kazuo, and I have known each other for 40 years, and it's changed dramatically. Well, first of all, Japanese women are not marrying Japanese men in the numbers that they used to, because they're not going to be a traditional wife. And so it's a little bit like many of the cultures where we would we in the sort of Western world would say, family cares for them, so we don't need to worry about provision for that particular cultural group or another. The world continues to change, and so do those cultures.
Is there one thing that you would suggest people could do perhaps differently after watching this, and perhaps being somewhat alarmed by this episode, in a sense that, oh my God, it's a bit depressing?
But we're taking control.
Yeah, well, exactly.
That's right. And I think that's the thing.
And you say, talking about it is doing something.
Conversation.
Yeah, take control.
Totally.
So I certainly wouldn't go and Google what, all the signs of dementia, et cetera, because the moment you walk into a room and can't remember why you got there, you'd start to worry yourself. But have the conversation. Have the conversation with your spouse or your sister or brother or mum or dad. Have it. My husband and I, we've started future-proofing our house. We want to stay as home for as long as possible. We just happen to own our own home. So therefore, how do we make it work for us when we're 85? Because I'm close to 65 now.
So you're talking handrails and...
ramps, a ramp rather than stairs. Have you got, is there any way to get floor levels all at one level? Yes. We're putting in a bigger shower so that if you need somebody to transfer you, you can get 2 people in the shower at a time. Once upon a time, it had a whole different meaning. But
we've got an episode on that coming.
But have the conversation.
Yeah.
And be real. We all know we're going to die.
Right.
So just have that conversation. Then you've had it, park it, and then we know what we're doing. We know where we're going to go. And if circumstances arrive, we've got a bit of a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that plan, how does it look? It's just really a conversation written down?
Well, somebody did say to me you should write it down, and I think and particularly they said you should write it down because you've released Ben from being your carer, and I'm gathering that what they're talking about is, so if my children try to pressure Dad, I've written it down. So if I'm no longer able to express myself clearly, or people don't listen to me, I can point to the fact that it's part of what is this is where my will is, but it's also a letter saying I release my husband from that.
Wow.
Is there one uncomfortable truth that you want to say out loud?
The one that comes into my mind is that, again, most people think they're going to die at home, and probably only about 10% of people actually do. So the most common place that people are dying at the moment is residential care, and they're not necessarily living there before they die. So what I'm saying is that palliative care out in the community is being overwhelmed. Individuals don't have family members. I think we're going to have 30% less family members in the next 25 years who can care for them in that way. So the uncomfortable truth is, as much as nobody wants to go into residential care, there's an extreme likelihood you're going to end up there.
So say after a fall or something like that?
Well, or just you're now in your last 3 months of your life, because we are getting shorter and shorter lengths of time that people are coming into care. So the message is we have to have it there, because a world without it, well, ask Wairoa, it's pretty dire.
And for you, is there anything that gives you hope?
Yeah, the human beings inside that work inside these facilities just amaze me.
That's what I mean. Both my parents went through, both retirement village, then care, and I just couldn't believe the dedication and the love that they made their life so much better. Really,
it's so humbling. What a calling.
Yeah. And it is a calling.
I've been called to do it, but
no,
it's not well paid.
That's the thing. I'm not sure I'm that special person, right? That's not what my skill is. My skill's talking and arguing with people to support those individuals. But it's the level of respect that I've seen. Here's just a small snippet. So I was at a facility yesterday, and this is the main dining room, and actually they were and this is a care facility. all of the residents were out of their, well, if they wanted to be, were out of their rooms, but they were in a big open atrium, all doing different games or interacting in different ways. Large number of healthcare assistants there. So that's the main dining room, but then there was a smaller dining room off to the side for those individuals that need to be fed, and that is to maintain their dignity. And that's what I mean. They've given some thought to, this is this person's dignity. We're going to make sure that we provide for that, you know? They're amazing, those people.
Well, it's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you so much for, your understanding and insights. I mean, for goodness sake, it's such a, I mean, as we say, the population's getting older and older, and it's going to be so much more of an issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we can't hide away from it.
No. And I'm dedicating myself to fixing this issue. When I was previously the Minister for Seniors, tried to have a go at it from inside the beehive. That didn't quite work. This is an opportunity to have a go at it from outside, because I want it to be there, because I might need it. And while I'm confident in the care, there's a whole lot of other bits and pieces that are crumbling around the edges.
Gosh, I can only imagine what it's going to be like for our children.
I know. If we can do something to support you with your message, come in behind with trying to shine a light on some of the problems and how they can be fixed, it would be an honour, wouldn't it?
Totally.
Oh,
absolutely.
I mean, this has been amazing. We really appreciate just a real conversation about what is real life happening as we move through it. Yeah.
Great.
Cool.
Tracey Martin, thank you so much.
Kia ora.
Tracey, thank you. This conversation has been confronting at times, but it's also incredibly important.
And if this episode has made you uncomfortable, that's okay. These are hard realities, but understanding them early gives families more choices, not fewer. And if you're listening thinking, look, I don't even need this yet, this is exactly the right time to start learning. Not to panic, not to make decisions today, but to be a little more prepared than yesterday. Because ageing doesn't happen all at once, but when things change, they often can change fast.
If you do know someone who's supporting an ageing parent or carrying a lot on their own, please share this episode with them.
You can also share your stories with us. Details are in the show notes. Thank you for listening to The Next Bit. We will see you next time.